It's Wednesday, July 2nd. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is my buddy Scott Pianowski. Scott, what's going on, man?
Not much. I can't believe we made it to July, Matt. Yeah, it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And when you're talking fantasy football, really everything comes down to the quarterback, right? Even if we don't draft them proactively, any stance we have on any offense has to come down to a question of how do we feel about their passing game? How do we feel about their quarterback play? That player touches everybody else in the offense. So I feel like we're going to go over some important ground today.
We absolutely are. We are talking quarterbacks here on the final episode of Flip the Script. But Scott, you said it. It is July somehow. I mean, June just that thing just flew by. June ended in a flash, and really, like, this is kind of known in the industry. It's like the last holiday before training camp and fantasy draft season really kick up. We got a lot of exciting stuff here coming over the course of the summer here at Yahoo Fantasy, but let's get it started right here. A small programming note: starting next week, the podcast is going to be back in your feeds on Tuesday and Thursday. No more one show a week. We're going to start ramping up here as we inch closer and closer to training camps, and we have a very special announcement that I'm going to share at the end of the show today. But like you said, Scott, we're talking quarterbacks here. We're concluding Flip the Script, our little summer series, with looking at a topic that I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have been on the wrong side of history every single year with this particular topic. Today, we are hoping to identify this year's Sam Darnold, basically who is the quarterback reclamation project of the year. Again, resurrects their career, lifts up an offense that they lead. 3 years in a row, this has happened. It was Geno Smith in 2022, it was Baker Mayfield in 2023, and then it was Sam Darnold last year. So, Scott, I mean, I hope you are going to do the heavy lifting this year, buddy, because, shout out to Andy Behrens. He was the guy he was dead on Baker. He was dead on Darnold last year. He was he's gotten this right every single year. Of course, wish Andy well. He's not with us now, but man, I have gotten this wrong every year. Like, I didn't draft enough. I love the Seahawks receivers in 2022. Didn't draft enough of them because of Geno Smith. I was not really in on Darnold last year, and then Baker Mayfield again. Love those Bucs receivers. Didn't draft enough of them in that year with Baker coming over there because I was so burned by Baker in Carolina. So, like, what do all these quarterbacks have in common other than the fact that I was on the wrong side of history each time?
Yeah, and much love to Andy Behrens, who was a teammate of mine for a long time and will be a good friend of mine for the rest of my life. So we love you, Andy, and we miss you, buddy, and I'm sure we'll all do something again soon. I think it comes down to coaching, right? I mean, Sam Darnold, who I was in on last year because I just believe in Kevin O'Connell so much. And the previous year, Baker Mayfield was a Dave Canales project. And it's not the last time we'll say Dave Canales' name. And, what do we think about Liam Cohen? What's he going to do with Trevor Lawrence this year? Coaching, the NFL the coaching is more important there than any other of the major pro sports leagues, right? I mean, we don't really say in fantasy baseball, now that this pitcher is with a certain manager, maybe a pitching coach could tweak something, but we don't make radical changes to rankings based on who the coaching staff is in certain sports, even though some organizations do a better job than others. But in football, the play caller is everything. And you need to know you need to have an opinion on every play caller in the league, right? You need to know all the offensive coordinators / head coaches who are the play callers, and you need to have an opinion on them, whether it's good, bad. That some guys we're still gathering info on. And obviously when play callers leave to get promoted, to get head coaching jobs, we don't know a lot of times about who's been promoted. Often those are hires from within. We see that in Detroit this year. We see that in Tampa Bay this year, and we'll maybe get up to speed with those guys during the season. But to me, whenever you're talking quarterbacks, you can't remove that from the play caller. And a lot of times the faith you have in a player is going to be because you trust his coach to put him in a position to succeed.
Yeah, that's very well said. Like, I think the play caller, the offensive designer is very important here in all this. Just sort of kind of the stability of the ecosystem too, I think, is a big ecosystem. Another thing we're going to say multiple times, or at least I'm certainly going to say, we know that multiple times over the course of this podcast. And like good supporting talent too, I think is again the theme here. Like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett for Geno Smith in 2022, Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans, and not the full form of Chris Godwin that we saw the next year, just last season, obviously, but he was still a part of the proceedings there. That's a big part of this as well. Sam Darnold, of course, having Justin Jefferson, having Jordan Addison, getting TJ Hawkinson back at the end of the year, like having really good pass catchers, I do think is a part of what can help. Like, look, of course, the quarterback lifts up the pass catchers, but those guys are a big part of lifting up the quarterback as well. But I do have to point out, you mentioned Dave Canales, obviously with Baker Mayfield in 2023. He was an unknown, right? You know, we didn't know who Dave Canales was going into that year, although he was the quarterback coach for Geno Smith in 2022. So he's actually got a hand in two of our cases here. But Scott, do you remember who the 2022 Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator was in this season where Geno Smith had this career rebirth? Do you remember who that offensive coordinator was?
Was it Brian Schottenheimer?
No, it was Shane Waldron, like persona non grata in the fantasy industry, right? Like, I mean, every fantasy analyst bags on Shane Waldron as like the biggest dummy that you've ever seen based on what happened with the Chicago Bears last year. But he was the offensive coordinator in 2021, Russell Wilson's last year there, and then the Geno Smith first season, and then in 2023 as well. I think, look, I think I'm saying that tongue in cheek a little bit, like, Waldron, I do think, gets a little bit of a bad rap. He was obviously not good with the Bears last season. Of course, there's no question about that. But let's also remember, like, stability at the head coaching spot is a big part of this as well, because everything in Seattle, like Pete Carroll touched everything. That all came down from him. And Dave Canales has said that Pete Carroll is a big, like, obvious coaching mentor for him. He models his coaching style after Pete Carroll. So don't overlook the head coach in all of this as well, because sometimes, like, when things rot, they rot from the top. And I think that was certainly part of what was going on in Chicago last season.
Which of the Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold comeback stories the last 3 years, which of them shocked you the most?
Oh man, that's a really good question, because like I said, I've been on the wrong side of history of all of them. I think it was Baker actually that shocked me the most, mostly because I think with Geno, I was a little lower on Russell Wilson as he exited Seattle. I was very like kind of suspicious of what he was gonna do in Denver, because I just think like he's such a hyper specific player. So it wasn't that I saw Geno Smith coming. Like let me say that, but I really believe in Pete Carroll and like believed that was a good offense. I just wish I had taken more of those Seahawks receivers. With Baker, I think it was the biggest surprise to me, because Scott, like he was the worst quarterback in the league when he was with the Panthers. Like he was horrible playing there. And I thought his revival with the Rams got maybe a little bit overplayed because of that one Thursday night game where he got off the plane and started a game and they won. Like he was mostly pretty bad for that Rams team for the rest of the course of it. So, and he also, dude, he signed for like a $4 million deal or something like that. He got like no money, and it was in a training camp battle with Kyle Trask. So to me, what about you? Because that one to me was the most shocking one.
Yeah, I think it was Mayfield too. I remember after he started to play well in a couple of the early season games, I led one of my booms and bust columns, a reaction piece I write on Sundays for Yahoo during the NFL season. Baker was the lead item. And one of our higher ups, somebody who's a couple levels above us at Yahoo, wrote to me and said, "Oh, Baker's a boom, huh?" And I couldn't really sell it to him. It's like I fully believed in it. It's like he was playing well, but I had no idea if that was sustainable. I wasn't really bought in myself. I'm like, geez, of all the things he has to point out, it's me advertising for Baker Mayfield. This is going to end really well. But then Baker upheld that end of the deal. Then he loses Canales. We worry about it. Then Liam Cohen ends up being like even better than Canales. So I would say it was Mayfield. And remember with Geno Smith too, we did see he got a handful of starts the previous season when Russell Wilson was still there and actually played pretty well. That stuff isn't always sticky year over year, but at least we had some proof of concept that Geno Smith could be successful in that offense, and he had some familiarity with the pieces there. So, you weren't going in completely blind. You could at least apply that as a possible reason to succeed. And it comes down to this. I mentioned it earlier with Darnold and Minnesota. It's just Kevin O'Connell. I think he might be the best offensive passing game designer. It's a big statement because Andy Reid's still in the league. Sean McVay's still in the league. There are other offensive coaches we feel really good about. I think Josh McDaniels was a great hire for the Patriots. Not meant to be a head coach, but meant to be a dynamic offensive coordinator. And I'm really excited to see. I love how Mike Vrabel laughs. Yeah, great. We're the March champions. So what? Doesn't mean anything. And he's right on that. But I think the Patriots will be a fun team this year, and perhaps a little under-repped in the Frank Schwab power rankings that are going on right now. I'm doing fantasy notes for that, so make sure you check out that daily series. But Kevin O'Connell is the guy. The phrase I like to use, I'd follow Kevin O'Connell into a burning building right now.
100%. And yeah, I think that whether he's the best pass game designer or anything like that, I think what we can agree on, Scott, is that he actually really does love the idea of rehabilitating these quarterbacks. Like he takes like a pride in it. It was a source of pride with Darnold. It was a source of, I think it was like a source of pride of bringing Daniel Jones into the building late in the year. I actually have a theory to pitch at you about a certain quarterback that might need to find his way to Minnesota sooner than later, but that will come up later in the show. But before we toss to break here, as we usually do, and we do flip the script, let's talk about the guy from last year, and let's dive a little deeper into the Sam Darnold 2024 season. I think we know what went right. Maybe again, like obviously down the stretch, things did not end very well, but Darnold was not drafted in most leagues. He actually ended up finishing as the quarterback 8. Again, whether we buy that was more him or it was more the system, he was one of the more productive quarterbacks in the league on a stats basis last season.
Right. The ability to make chunk plays, the ability to extend plays in the pocket, still keep the eyes downfield. I think about the throw he made against Seattle, where he climbed the ladder in the pocket and just threw a laser. I think it was to Addison. And Darnold, much like Geno Smith, right? Drafted by the Jets, everything goes wrong. I mean, Geno Smith was punched by a teammate when he was on the Jets. Sam Darnold got mono. Does anybody get mono anymore? Just the run out being as bad as it could be. And sometimes you just have to give these guys some time to find the right situation and away from all the chaos. And it's the Jets have been such a clown car for so long. Of course, we'll be talking about the Jets in about 5 minutes. But I get every quarterback. Every quarterback would want to throw to Justin Jefferson, would want to throw to Jordan Addison. You mentioned they got about a half season from TJ Hawkinson. He's more of a catch and fall guy now, but he didn't get any shorter. He's a really easy target to identify. And they had a decent defense. They had a decent offensive line. They had a semblance of a running game, depending on when Jones was healthy. And Minnesota, people forget because they ended the season so poorly. If they beat Detroit in week 17 or week 18, I guess it was, they're the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's why I cannot wait, Matt, to get this NFC North thing going, because I think you can make a playoff case for all 4 teams. You can make a miss the playoff case for all 4 teams, including the Lions. I know they went 15-2 last year, but we'll see what they do without their coordinators, and they lost their starting center too. Their offensive line now, I just saw a recent offensive line rankings that didn't even have them in the top 5 anymore. I'm curious to see if they've lost. That's always been the rock of that team, right? What they always knew they had a better offensive line than anybody else they were playing against. I don't think that's true this year with Ragnow out, but we'll see how that plays out. And obviously with losing the 2 coordinators is gigantic, but it's going to be a great division again. And, Darnold, it's funny. We saw the greatness and all during the season, the question was, well, what does Minnesota do? I mean, they drafted J.J. McCarthy. They got to make a decision here. Darnold's making them ask hard questions. And then he played so poorly the last 2 games. Like, okay, this is what you do. You say, thanks a lot. We enjoyed it. Good luck in free agency. And they didn't get anything for him. And, it's just so funny how that went from a hot button, AM morning show talking heads thing to like, no, okay, they really have one choice, which is like, thanks for the memories. It was a fun season. We drafted our, next 10 years quarterback. We got to turn it over to him.
I mean, shoot, I remember on this show by that end of the season, it was against the Packers, right? Where they beat the Packers, and in the locker room afterwards, they're like picking him up. His teammates are putting Sam Darnold on their shoulder. They're like, he's all sprayed with liquid, and the whole thing. Kevin O'Connell's like watching it with like starry eyes from the side of the locker room and all this. And I remember thinking like, man, because I'd been squarely on team. Yeah, you thank Darnold for his services. You let him go try to pursue something elsewhere, and then you just turn to JJ McCarthy in the next year because that was the whole plan here. But I remember at that point thinking, like, can they really do that? Because he is producing at such a high level, and like these guys love him, and they seem so bought in on him. And then that was it. Like if the Viking season had ended right there, it would have been a beautiful like football movie. But then, of course, it ended with two, games where Darnold just completely fell apart. The pass protection fell apart. They were hoping that they addressed that second part of it, the pass protection, with a lot of offensive line interior upgrades this offseason, also getting back to running the ball a little bit better. But just Darnold, they obviously did eventually say goodbye to him, and he goes to Seattle. What are your expectations with Darnold now after this great year in Minnesota, kind of going to Seattle, reuniting with Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator there, who he spent some time with in San Francisco, quietly was just on the bench there for the 49ers in 2023?
Yeah, just worried that I'm not sure what's left in the passing game. Obviously, JSN had a breakout season last year, but Cooper Kupp, all of his efficiency metrics are going down. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is wide receiver 3. So I don't think they're really setting him up to succeed here. One rising player and two guys who are clearly not just on the back nine, but they might be putting out on 18. And it's sad to see Cooper Kupp, the diminished player that he is. I don't know what Kenneth Walker is. He's in a contract year. His deal is about to be up. I think maybe Charbonnet is the better running back there. But I think Seattle, the best thing I can say is I don't know how good the defense is going to be. So there could be a lot of 30-27 in Seattle's future. But I think we're going to get the Darnold experience. It's going to be the Sam Darnold keeps both teams in the game. He makes a couple of throws that make you go, wow, he'll always have that arm talent. He is sneaky athletic. He's a better runner than he's probably giving credit for. But he's going to probably lead the NFL in interceptions too.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I number one, Darnold, of course, expectations-wise in fantasy, he's actually back to going as QB 27 in early best ball drafts. So, like, he's right back to where he was last year, even after that great season, because I think a lot of people share some of the skepticism that you outlined there. The one thing I would disagree with you on is that I actually think that the Seahawks defense is going to be really good this season. I think they showed some things down the stretch. I really like Mike McDonald as a designer. I think they added a couple of pieces there that are going to be pretty critical. So, to me, I think that defense is going to take a step. I think they hire Kubiak to make the run game and like hide some of the offensive line deficiencies. Of course, they drafted Gray Zabel in round 1. I think they want to be like hey, we have a great defense, we have a really strong running game, but Darnold is just like, he's not the keep the train on the tracks type of quarterback. He's a guy that is gonna write some checks and is gonna hope his arm cashes him, because he does have some really big time arm talent, as you mentioned. But just the receiving talent, JSN's a very, very good player, but you've got like a sacrificial X and MVS, and a guy in Cooper Kupp I think is a slot only player. So it's sort of like I can kind of squint and see what they're going for here, but the passing game part of it is a little odd.
And what a year it's been for Clint Kubiak, right? I mean, the Saints start off 2-0. They beat the living snot out of Carolina. They beat the living snot out of Dallas. It's like, oh, look, Kubiak, he's not afraid to run play action. This is something that the Saints, ignored, previously, and then everything falls apart. Everybody gets hurt, including the entire receiving room. The two main guys, of course, Shaheed was having a breakout season, and what I wouldn't give to see Chris Olave just have a healthy year. We haven't seen that, or get him to play with a plus quarterback. That's going to take a while. It won't happen this year. But so Clint Kubiak went from the talk of the town to run out of town, and now he's trying to put his career back together with Seattle. But he's always heavy on the play action. So Darnold is going to take his shots. He's going to take those early down passing, proactive, play fake, the 5-step, to try to hit a 20-yarder crosser, try to hit something deep to MVS, the cardio routes that he's going to run. So Seattle, the joke on social media is that the Seahawks never play a normal game, that they always have these chaotic games that have weird scores, and they take longer than everybody else for whatever reason. There's some long replay, or DK Metcalf would get thrown out of a game or something. That can't happen this year. But I always feel like the Seahawks are an interesting team, if somewhat of a bizarre team. They're always kind of like a knuckleball team where they play differently than everybody else. So they'll be fun. They may put the fun and dysfunctional this year, but I'm seeing them being something like an 8-9 team that has entertaining football games. So, I'm a Darnold guy. I know he's never going to be. I know he got some down ballot MVP
part of the oligarchy
last year, but Yeah, he's never going to be on the cover of Madden or anything like that. But I mean, Sam Darnold is a bona fide starter, and he showed last year you could be a contender for a number one seed with he's your guy. And it's not like, their defense was good, but it's not like they weren't an offensive driven team. So I'd like to see Sam Darnold. I actually think he's a pretty good value where he's being drafted right now. It's part of that speaks to the depth of the position, but I don't see why a healthy Sam Darnold would be a top 20 quarterback.
Interesting. You mentioned I think I might know the answer to this question based on what you just said there, but like we flashed the JSN projections on the screen earlier of that right now Yahoo's got him projected for 88 catches, which is a big fall from 100 catches in his second season, 1,100 yards. We've got him dipped. The system's got him dipped under 1,100 yards. That would be a pretty dramatic drop. I think that would be labeled a disappointing third season if he comes out with those stats in particular after what he did in year 2. But that's kind of leads me to my question here, Scott. It feels like the industry is mostly out on what the Seahawks did this offseason. I'm not talking just fantasy. I'm talking also like real NFL analysts. Are you, Scott Pianowski, are you in? Are you out? Or are you like tepidly curious about what the Seahawks did this offseason, essentially just blowing up their entire offense?
The move I can't get behind is Kupp. Again, age 32 season. He's played 12, 12, and 9 games the last 3 years. And his efficiency metrics, despite being tied to Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, his efficiency metrics were the worst of his entire career last year. I always say that player development is not linear, but player downsides of their career, when players get worse at the end of their career, their deterioration, those curves are almost always the same. They're very consistent, and it's just a line going down at that 45-degree angle into the ground. So I'm afraid that the toothpaste is out of the tube with Cooper Kupp, and he's only going to get worse until he ends up retiring in a year or two.
Yeah, you always say this. Once the cheese goes bad, it doesn't get unbad. I mean, that's like a classic Scott phrase that's always in my mind. I agree with you about that. Usually, like wide receiver declines if you're over the age of 30. Like it doesn't suddenly just flip around, and I think that is the way it's gonna. Like guys can have down seasons, from their productions based like in their mid 20s and stuff like that, and you can count on like a little bit of a bounce back. But at this point in their career, like the guy is who he is. So I would say if I flip that question back on myself, I'm more like open to being tepidly curious about what the Seahawks did. I don't think I'm like all the way in. I don't think I'm all the way out. It's cheap analysis, Scott, but like based on the first 4 games, I'm going to know a lot more how I feel about like, all right, this was probably like a stupid idea as opposed to, okay, well, this is interesting. Like they did need a little bit of a refresh across the board in the pass game and the run game and along the offensive line in Seattle.
I wish they had an exciting tight end. Noah Fant was somebody who I liked once upon a time, and he's the one Iowa tight end who really hasn't popped in the last few years. Who knows? Maybe a healthy season from Fant and a new coordinator will get him going. But if Warren had landed here, if Loveland had landed here, I would have thought, okay, these guys might get 800 yards right out of the box on this team. They have 90 targets ready to go, where I don't know if the Colts or the Bears, respectively, will be able to use those guys because so crowded, so many different options in Indianapolis and Chicago. So it could be, I know we've been spoiled with the last 2 years where Laporta and then Bowers last year just broke football. It's not going to happen this year because the setup just doesn't make sense. But are you talking yourself into Noah Fant? Are you an Elijah Arroyo believer? AJ Barner? Is there a tight end in Seattle? Jimmy Graham going to come out of retirement? Is there a tight end we can get one of,
I was going to say, for what it's worth, they seem super bullish on Elijah Arroyo, even to the point that I believe GM John Schneider and Kubiak have said, we think this guy could play X receiver for us, which I'm skeptical of that. Always skeptical of the tight end can be the X receiver. I don't know about that. But they certainly have an opening there because Kupp is not that. JSN, I think, can play more outside, but he's definitely not going to line up at X. And MVS, like I said, is a sacrificial guy. So they need somebody there. We'll see if Arroyo can do that in year 1. I thought he was a little more inconsistent than a guy that was just like ready to rock in year 1. But I think AJ Barner was pretty good for them last year as like a true inline guy. So my guess is that they're going to go pretty like condensed and heavy with those 2 guys. I honestly don't even know if Fant is going to be on this roster come week 1, a contract they could get out of, and maybe a trade candidate as well.
Right. And Arroyo was a second-round pick, so at least there's some draft capital that may lead to some latent upside. So somebody to consider in those deeper formats.
All right. we are going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to flip the script to 2025 and talk through our guys who could be this year's Sam Darnold right after this. Welcome back. We just looked at Sam Darnold's 2024 breakout season. Now it is time to flip the script to 2025. All right, Scott, usually we have like some real qualifications here. This player's got to be drafted in this range. We're looking for this. We're looking for that. I'm going to keep this straightforward, simple for you, for me, for everybody listening and watching. Our qualification to be this year's Sam Darnold: was this quarterback bad before, and can he have a revival? Can he be good in his new situation? So I think that's what we're looking for here, because Geno, Baker, Darnold, all those guys were bad before. Maybe they showed little signs of flashes, this, that, and the other, but generally were not regarded as like good quality starting above average NFL quarterbacks. And then they became that in their new spots. That's what we're looking for here. So I've got 3 buckets of quarterbacks, and really, if I'm being honest with you, Scott, I think our winner is going to come from the first bucket, which is the obvious ones. And the 3 guys here, we've got Justin Fields from the New York Jets, who is being drafted high in fantasy. He's QB 8 right now. Totally get it. Totally understand. It depends like where you're looking. Some sites he's actually outside of the top 10. But generally, again, like people are in on him from a fantasy perspective, not an NFL perspective, though, which I think is a little more critical to talk about here. We've also got Daniel Jones of the Indianapolis quarterbacks. I think the Indianapolis Colts, he fits in this bucket. He's not being drafted very high at all. And then Bryce Young from the Carolina Panthers, who's sort of kind of cheating because he showed well at the end of the season. So those 3 guys, Scott, I think are probably our best candidates. Which one of them stands out to you as somebody that you actually might want to make a case for here?
Yeah, it's a question of if we even think Fields is cheating or if he actually qualifies, because last year,
I think he qualifies. I do think he qualifies, but for what it's worth.
Well, you can't discuss Justin Fields without the one obvious gorilla in the room, which is that he represents the difference between real life value and fantasy value, because nobody thinks Justin Fields is a franchise quarterback. The Bears soured on that idea. The Steelers didn't believe it, and the Jets probably don't believe it. But Fields is a very capable fantasy quarterback. He was the quarterback 6 for the Bears back in 2022 when he ran for over 1,000 yards. And last year for the Steelers, he starts the first 6 games, only throws 5 touchdown passes, and he still was the quarterback 6 because he had 5 rushing touchdowns. The yardage wasn't crazy, it wasn't haywire, but he was still a proactive runner. So he goes to the Jets. I think the important thing for him fantasy-wise is to notice that Tyrod Taylor is the backup. He's into an age 36 season. Taylor is there to be the caddy. He's there to be the support system, the quasi-assistant coach. He's not there to challenge Justin Fields. The idea isn't that Justin Fields makes a couple of bad throws and looks over his shoulder. Am I coming out of the game? Am I getting yanked? That's not going to happen unless he's absolutely awful for several weeks and they have no choice. So the job belongs to Fields. They have presumably a good defense. It didn't play well last year. You would think new head coach Aaron Glenn will have some ideas on how to fix that. And even the receiver room in the Jets is kind of underwhelming. At least Garrett Wilson, Fields, they have the Ohio State time together that they spent, so they already have some familiarity. They've already run reps together. They were successful together at Ohio State, which is why Fields was such a high draft pick. Ultimately, look, it's Konami code, it's Rich Rebar, it's the way they score points for fantasy. A healthy Justin Fields in a full season is not only going to run for 1,000 yards, but he's also going to get rushing touchdowns. There are some mobile quarterbacks who get the yards, don't get the touchdowns. Lamar Jackson comes to mind. And there's also you get some quarterbacks who may get the touchdowns, don't get a lot of yards. A healthy Fields, we're looking at maybe like 1,200 rushing yards and like 8 to 12 touchdowns is totally on board. He could even beat 12 rushing touchdowns in a full season if things fell right. So I know a lot of people don't want to draft a quarterback if they don't feel that great about his arm talent or about, and Fields also has a gigantic sack problem. That's what, if you want to discuss if Fields is really a bona fide NFL quarterback, you have to come down to his navigation of sacks. Sacks are more of a quarterback stat than they are an offensive line stat. Fields just hasn't figured out that part of the game, and maybe we're deep enough in his career that he never will. But because rushing production is so massively important for any quarterback, I don't see how he could not be a top 10 quarterback just because he's so good at that.
Yeah, right. Like that's the thing. It almost isn't really like worth having the discussion of, is Justin Fields going to be a good fantasy quarterback? Because the answer is just simply yes. Like, as long as he's on the field, and like you mentioned, I think he would have to embarrass himself and be like he just is an unplayable guy for Tyrod Taylor to go out there. Now, Tyrod had a couple drives for the Jets last year, where ironically, like it was the moment of the season where there were reports that Garrett Wilson was really frustrated with Aaron Rodgers, and then they get blown out by the Bills, and then Tyrod goes in at the end of the game and he throws a touchdown to Garrett Wilson. It felt very, very poetic. So like there's a chance that, okay, Fields really pukes all over the place, like they can turn to Taylor, but I think it is very unlikely. You mentioned the sack problem. Like I that is something that it has to be considered here. This is a team that wants to run the ball, wants to play good defense, and like wants to be, while rebuilding and looking towards the future, wants to be competitive in that regard. I will say, if the Jets offensive line, like these young guys like Olufushanu and Armon Membu, the young tackles, like if those guys come together, this looks like it could be one of, if not the best offensive lines that Justin Fields has played behind. But nevertheless, as you mentioned, sacks are generally a quarterback stat, and he quite literally has the highest sack rate since he entered the league in 2021. So that's just going to be a part of the equation. But maybe if we can get that sack rate down from like the league high to, maybe top 10 highest sack rates, we're doing something there. But Scott, I actually think we haven't said the name Tanner Engstrand yet. And I think, because again, the question of whether Fields is going to be a good fantasy quarterback it's just almost like not worth having, because the answer is just yes. The question is just, can he have even sort of a mini revival to be like okay, not only is he a solid, like he's a good in fantasy, but he's like a solid NFL quarterback, and maybe the Jets can just rock with him in year 2 of this build. And I actually think that Tanner Engstrand, the new Jets offensive coordinator coming over as the passing game coordinator from the Lions, is the biggest variable here, Scott. Engstrand is an unknown, but man, I'm telling you, after just charting Garrett Wilson the last couple of days for reception perception, I think if Engstrand brings anything, Scott, from Detroit, this offense is going to look and feel dramatically different, because the Jets last year were number 3 in terms of highest formation width. They were one of the most spread out teams in the NFL, and it was very static because that's what Rodgers likes. Not a lot of motion, not a lot of pre-snap eye candy, and they were very, very pass heavy. They were one of the most pass heavy teams in the NFL. They were top 5 in overall pass rate. Well, the Lions are not a pass heavy team. They're one of the lower teams in terms of neutral pass rate. They're number 3 in terms of the lowest average formation width. They play very condensed. They take advantage of space, and there's a lot of pre-snap eye candy. So I think actually whether Engstrand can be like a Dave Canales force, as we talked about earlier, Scott, is maybe our biggest question here in terms of, can Fields turn this thing around?
Right. Engstrand spending 5 years with the Lions. Obviously, he and Glenn in the same locker room. And even in the NFC North, you got to look at Fields from time to time when he was with the Bears. So he has some familiarity there, maybe more than a normal coach would. And it's so funny. You think of last year, Kirk Cousins, didn't want to do play action, certain stuff in the playbook you couldn't run with him, or Rodgers wanting everybody to stay put, wants a static offensive setup. Well, you're giving up play action and pre-snap movement are like the 2 offensive cheat codes that every team should be running. It's like telling a basketball team, no, you can't run the pick and roll and you can't shoot threes. It's like, well, that's what everybody else does. Why can't we do that? That's where the points are. That's where the efficiency is, right?
Right.
So it's so far. You have some of these teams that don't let their quarterbacks call audibles, which just seems like prehistoric to me. A good way to lose your quarterback and lose your offense. But again, Engstrand is an unknown because he's worked under people, but the right people, right? Ben Johnson, that offense that the Lions built over the last few years, and Goff and St. Brown, and what they did with Jameson Williams, and the running backs have been terrific. Obviously a carnival. Now the talent doesn't translate with the Jets, and I'm sure Aaron Glenn is trying to do that Mike Tomlin thing where how do we win every game 13-10? That's the Jets would love to have 17, 13, 10 games this year. They would sign up for that because maybe it would mean 9 wins. They might have the team set up for that. But I'm curious. Again, you have to take it on faith a lot of times. It's a blind call about if Engstrand is ready for the play sheet. But end of the day, man, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is best, right? Justin Fields isn't going to lose his job. Justin Fields is going to run. It's not always going to be pretty. You may not want to watch him play. If you're a Jets fan, I'm sure he's going to drive you crazy during the season. But end of the year, he's going to be quarterback 7.
Totally agree. So I think we talked through Justin Fields here. Let's talk about the Colts and Daniel Jones, because he does kind of fit the bill of what we're looking for pretty cleanly as well. Former first-round pick, just like Mayfield, just like Sam Darnold. He's going to a new situation. Obviously, like I said, he spent a little bit of time in Kevin O'Connell's little quarterback rehab camp last year, hanging around the Vikings roster. Not sure if he absorbed any of that goodness during that time, whatever. But again, we could talk about Anthony Richardson, but I think based on where things are right now, Scott, and look, it's July. We got a long way to go, but Richardson he's maybe going to be ready for training camp, but he missed a lot of time. He's dealing with another shoulder injury, and it just feels like every time the Colts talk about consistency and stuff like that, they're kind of leaning towards Daniel Jones being the guy. And I guess my question to you, Scott, is if Daniel Jones is the week 1 starter, how long can he hold on to that job? And I was talking to our quarterback charter over at Reception Perception, Corey Kinnan, and he put it like, we're looking for, I think Shane Steichen is looking for somebody to clear the Minshew minimum, where they had a pretty good season, almost made the playoffs with Gardner Minshew as the starter in 2023 when Anthony Richardson was hurt. Do you think that Daniel Jones can start in week 1 and maybe clear that Minshew minimum with this Colts offense?
It's possible. It's even plausible. Is it likely? I don't know if I can go with that, but Daniel Jones was the quarterback 9 in 2022. And although some people just laugh when you mention a quarterback's win-loss record, he did go 9-6-1 with the Giants that year. And I don't think that's, I think quarterback wins mean more than they don't. I think I lean towards them meaning something than not meaning something. I mean, they're certainly not everything, because the NFL is such a context-driven game, but at least we've seen Jones play well. And he's another guy, doesn't run like Justin Fields, because almost nobody does, but Daniel Jones in a healthy season can run for 500 or 600 yards, a good athlete, a proactive runner, somebody who I could easily see running in, 4 to 6 touchdowns, something like that. And Steichen probably coaching for his job, right? He has to play the quarterback he thinks is best for his offenses. I know a lot of people would be like, well, wait a minute. We've seen Daniel Jones. Richardson is younger. He hasn't played that much in the NFL. Your future is about figuring out if Anthony Richardson can be your starter, if he can be a plus starter. Let's figure that out. Daniel Jones should be insurance. No. Shane Steichen needs to keep his job. And whoever he thinks is the best quarterback is going to play, even if it's more of a short-term solution and not a long-term solution. Because again, at some point at the end of the year, they need to have a good idea what Anthony Richardson is. And they're not going to figure out any of that if Daniel Jones is playing. But if Jones plays, indoor schedule, winnable division, all sorts of talent. He's got a feature back Jonathan Taylor who can catch it a little bit. All sorts of good receivers who do different things. You can speak to that better than anybody else can. They draft Ty Warren, who just had a monster season at Penn State, over 100 catches for a tight end. You never see that in college. So there are pieces here. And Steichen, a guy we were all in love with a couple of years ago, and now we're not really sure. Is Shane Steichen a plus offensive coordinator? Is he a gift or a curse? Is he a feature or a bug? We're kind of going to have an idea of who Steichen is at the end of the year too. Are we pointing towards him for fantasy or running away from him? End of the day, I think Jones starts on opening day. The problem with me with Jones, I think Richardson's I don't see a scenario where he doesn't start at least 4 games. And maybe it's like a 50-50 thing where they both play close to half the schedule. I'm just worried that they're going to go to the bullpen, whether it's Jones gets dinged up, they have an excuse to do it, or he plays poorly. They want to give Richardson a shot. What if the season goes off the skids and they have to play Richardson? I'm just concerned that both quarterbacks are going to start at least 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, I posed this question to Charles McDonald on Football 301 this week, where I was like, hey, it's like 10.5 games over under Daniel Jones starts 10.5 games, over under Anthony Richardson starts 5.5, over under Riley Leonard, 6th round pick, starts over 0.5. And he took the under on Jones, over on Richardson, and over on Riley Leonard, which basically points to the original scenario that I basically have laid out for this team since they signed Jones. Yeah, it's hey, guess what? Both of these guys make starts this year and everybody gets fired at the end of the year. I think, again, this is a Shane Steichen question too, as much as it is a Daniel Jones question, because I am concerned about Jones after a lot of injuries and how much zip he's lost off his arm. But this is a talented group of pass catchers, as you mentioned. A little bit of turnover on the offensive line. They obviously have a really good running back in Jonathan Taylor. I think this ecosystem is set up to be quarterback friendly. I generally am still optimistic about Steichen as the play caller and the offensive designer. I don't love how he's handled everything as the head coach and like manager of Anthony Richardson, but that kind of gets me to my point that I just think this team wants Daniel Jones to win this job, and I think they kind of want him to become the Sam Darnold. I think they really want him to win this exercise. I think they want Daniel Jones to be the Sam Darnold of this year and like give them maybe not top 10 quarterback production, but like passable quarterback play, maybe above average. And I think they believe that their ecosystem and their players can do that. I'm still a little skeptical. I will say this, Scott, like, again, cheap analysis, but 4 weeks into the season, I think we're going to know if this Daniel Jones thing is going on the right track or not. And I'm kind of open to it going okay, even if my base instinct is still all these guys are making starts and everybody's getting fired at the end of the year.
It would just be nice to see the offense have some buoyancy, right? I mean, one of the problems with Richardson, he makes splash plays, but he doesn't matriculate the ball down the field. At the end of the day, you see, oh yeah, he had those 2 long completions and they had like 11 first downs. You can't keep the Indianapolis defense off the field because there's too many 3 and outs. You need to have some consistency. You need sometimes the right play is a 7-yard pass on 3rd and 5. I mean, Anthony Richardson is always, with his accuracy and decision making, he's been one of the worst 3rd down quarterbacks in the league. It's great to get those chunk plays, and they have the talent at receiver. A really fun receiver room, by the way. I mean, Pittman, Pierce, Downs, Mitchell, those guys can all play. They all do different things. They're all players who could get better. We probably haven't seen the best season of any of them, although with Pittman, I guess it's an open question, but ascending talents for the most part. So I'd love to believe in the Colts. And again, Jones, things always get magnified in New York, the media market. And he was drafted earlier than people thought. People didn't see him as the 6th overall pick. They thought maybe he was a 1st round pick to begin with. And so that was a question. And then Jones, he was Danny Dimes. Everyone was all excited with him early on, and they just totally tore him down, had injuries, had things falling apart beside him, but still in his mid-20s. He does remind you, his career trajectory does remind you a little bit of Darnold, maybe a little bit of Geno Smith, drafted by a New York team who's kind of set up to fail. Change of scenery comes at the right time. I'll say this, if it's up to me, I just want to see Daniel Jones. I think he gives this offense a chance. Anthony Richardson needs to get better. He's not going to get better, obviously, by not playing. I mean, that's the type of thing that develops when you are in actual game action. But I want to have some Pittman shares. I want to have some Alex Pierce shares. I'd like to see Ty Warren get off to a good start, even though I'm probably not going to draft him this year. That needs Daniel Jones in the saddle in week 1.
You know how Anthony Richardson is going to get better, Scott? He is at some point going to find his way to the Kevin O'Connell quarterback rehab camp there. But do you remember, again, I had this conversation with a couple people this week. Do you remember like when the Colts beat the Vikings?
I do.
The Vikings beat the Colts after Richardson got benched, and O'Connell had that moment with him, like in the middle of the field, like, hey, you like keep on track, blah blah blah. You'll get back at this. It's just a setback. I'm not saying that JJ McCarthy's going to fail, but at some point, Anthony Richardson is going to end up on the Vikings roster. Just go ahead and write that in pen. I think that happens at some point in his career.
Every quarterback in the league wants to play for O'Connell, right? I mean, Caleb Williams admitted when he interviewed with the Vikings, like, oh, I'd love to play for that guy, right?
Yeah.
And right. What a great human moment for O'Connell when Richardson was at, probably, his nadir of his career, questioning himself. I've been embarrassed. I've been benched for Joe Flacco, who's 117 years old and still in the NFL. We're going to get to Joe Flacco later in the show. What a fun discussion that will be. But O'Connell just being a human being and being supportive and, just wanting to give somebody words of encouragement. All the more reason why people want to play for O'Connell. He is that coach who can connect with his players intellectually and emotionally, and that's why he's such a good head coach.
Third guy to talk about in the obvious ones, and again, I think this is the cheating answer, is Bryce Young, because, well, I guess, do you think it is a cheating answer, Scott? Because I think that kind of puts it into perspective. How much are you buying Bryce Young's I don't even know if I want to call it like a mini. I think a legit revival at the end of last year because he played so much better where he was just a non-functional quarterback in his rookie and then the first couple games of his second season. Like what do you think Bryce Young's ceiling is, and does he even really count in this exercise?
And we're all about cheating on this show, right? I mean, we're just trying to get you some stats. And Bryce Young, the last 7 games of last year, if we include week 18, which not everybody would do, quarterback 6, 5 rushing touchdowns, which was something I'm not sure how portable that is, how sticky that is, how sustainable that is for him. But his passing metrics were all improved. And it just goes to a quarterback with better coaching, with more confidence. And look at what he was doing it with. I mean, I'm an Adam Thielen fan, but I mean, mid-30s receiver as your best target. Now they have Ted McMillan coming in. Hubbard had a breakout year. They've added more talent in that backfield. Rico Dotto is an interesting player. Decent offensive line. A division that's up for grabs too, by the way. I mean, I could see not the Saints, but I can see the other 3 teams all competing. I think Carolina has a chance to maybe steal this division. So if you think McMillan, to me, if I'm going to proactively draft Young, that demands that McMillan is a factor in year one. And rookie receivers, it's always kind of a little bit of a risky bet. And I'm curious how he charted for you or what you expect from McMillan right away. But Canales, even if Canales isn't Liam Cohen, maybe Liam Cohen was really the brains in Tampa Bay. I still think Canales is a good coach. And I love that his team got so much better in the second half of the year. You look at embarrassed, we talked about in that first game against New Orleans. It looked like a really bad team. And Young was benched last year for Andy Dalton, a little bit to save Young from himself because he was just so confused at that point. And it just looked like his career was really in a horrible place. And then he comes back more confident, more accurate, better pocket decisions. And also Canales got him those layup throws that they didn't seem to scheme for him in his rookie year, Young's rookie year. It's so crazy how CJ Stroud, he was the right answer, number 2 pick. Bryce Young, he's a bust, number 1 pick. And then everything is different in their second seasons, in part because of the context. But I believe in Canales. The thing with Young is I just don't think the running stats are going to carry over those rushing touchdowns. Those feel fluky to me.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to be an efficient player and he's going to beat his ADP. I just don't think he's necessarily a seismic guy to target. He's somebody you're going to get at quarterback 23, and he's probably going to end up being like quarterback 16. You're like, oh yeah, super flex. Bryce Young was useful. As a backup, Bryce Young was useful. I don't think he has the juice to get into the top
10. Yeah, probably like a good ideal QB2 and super flex as you kind of laid out there. I love taking him in that format. It does stand out, and I'm glad that you highlighted Ted McMillan, T-Mac as he wants to go by, as kind of like the pivot point player here because, again, the theme with Geno, with Baker, with Darnold was they had these good veteran receivers in the prime of their careers. Justin Fields has one of those guys, literally just one, but he has one of those guys in New York in Garrett Wilson. Daniel Jones has a couple in Indianapolis and Michael Pittman. Josh Downs, I think, is just on such an upward trajectory, future superstar in the league. And there's some useful pass catchers like Alec Pierce has his role. Obviously, again, Warren, really rookie tight end, but like veteran receivers. Bryce does not really have those guys. Got Adam Thielen, but Adam Thielen is like my age, which now at this point means you're in a troubling spot at the wide receiver position. So he is he's not bright and young at this point. He's not in the prime of his career, but he played really well last season. Don't want to take that away from him. Xavier Legette, we're hoping that a role change for him kind of gives him a good second season, but the rookie product was middling at best, to be nice. They got interesting guys in the roster like Jalen Coker, but young, unproven type guys. And then there's McMillan, drafted 8th overall, and I thought was just an awesome X receiver prospect. But is he ready to have like a Brian Thomas Jr. rookie season? Maybe. I think that is within the range of outcomes. Maybe not. Okay, like Brian Thomas Jr. efficiency season, we'll see. But good prospect. Think he can start at X receiver at day one, which is going to settle everybody else into roles that fit their game. So I agree with you that if Young is going to have a season like a Sam Darnold where he vaults into being one of the 10 most productive quarterbacks, I do think that McMillan has to be like an instant hit because this defense is they added some guys, but it's still a problem. And there's a lot of problematic defenses in the NFC South. Like there should be a lot of really high scoring games in this division. And I do think based on what we saw last year, Bryce can be a guy that can keep pace in those games, whether he ever develops into like a top 10 NFL quarterback or not.
Yeah, we had an earlier discussion during the offseason about carnival teams, those teams that can move the ball and their defenses are so bad that they play in regular shootouts. And we just identified the NFC South as the Falcons could be like that, and the Panthers could be like that, and the Buccaneers could be like that. So it's going to be a fun division for fantasy. As far as Young's ultimate resting point for ranking and where he'll finish this year, what do you make of the rushing production that he did last year? How much of that do you think is sustainable or sticky carrying over to 25?
Yeah, I think that his play as a scrambler last season was revelatory down the stretch. I don't think he'll, obviously with his size, he'll never be like a designed runner, but the word confidence really exuded from Bryce's game at the end of last year. And it was completely absent, right, in his rookie year. And like, as a prospect, he played with a lot of confidence. He played like, I'm not, 5'10", 100 and whatever he's listed at pounds. Like he plays like a big dude and can like reset in the pocket, or he makes the decision to turn into a scrambler really fast and processes that well. So I think a lot of it comes down to touchdowns. Like, is he going to be a guy that they're inside the 10-yard line? It's a passing play. Nobody's open. I've got some quick pressure. I run in like a touchdown here or there. So I think he's the guy that's probably going to hover between like 3 and 5 touchdowns, which if you're going to throw the ball at a high rate and be a really productive passer, that's good enough to be a QB1 in fantasy. I think I'm skeptical, obviously, of just the ecosystem being ready to support him in that regard.
Other than McMillan, what receiver would you be most interested in drafting at his current market value?
Like none of them, to use your term, would be like a proactive pick.
Mm-hmm.
I think Thielen should be the favorite to outproduce like Leggett. And again, we'll see what Coker's role is. Coker probably is their future guy in the slot when Thielen moves on, which is probably going to be at the end of the season, but probably not going to be a factor this year. I think like Leggett would be a guy I wouldn't mind throwing a late round best ball pick at, but I don't know that he's going to have any like season long stability and startability in fantasy.
Yeah, Thielen turns 35 in late August, so it's just hard to bet on guys at that age. He's going to be a great coach someday. I'd love him. Like you think of, we always talk about Ohio State receivers, right? And Brian Hartline is the coach, former NFL player. He's doing a great job with those guys. I'd love to see. I mean, Adam Thielen can do whatever he wants in his retirement, but I'd love to see him run a wide receiver room or quarterback room in college. I think he'd be a really good offensive coach.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he's rubbing off on some of these guys here, because obviously this is a really young room outside of him. Like the age gap between Thielen and everybody else is huge. So I'm very excited about the Panthers offense. I don't know that that Bryce Young like really fits into this exercise, because I think he kind of turned the ship around late last year, but worth discussing in this regard. We are going to toss to our final break. We come back, we're quickly talk through 2 other buckets to discuss in who can be this year's Sam Darnold right after this. All right, we are back. Scott, the second bucket I want to talk through is the generational talents that haven't turned generational yet, but maybe now is the time with Caleb Williams. Again, Caleb Williams doesn't really fit this exercise, and I really don't think he can end up being our answer here, because like guy coming off a subpar to bad rookie season is not really what we're looking for here. We're looking for like a guy that everybody agrees is not good and suddenly turns his career around. I think everybody's open to Caleb Williams turning around under Ben Johnson in year 2. But Trevor Lawrence is an interesting guy to talk about here, Scott, because he is also like, if Ben Johnson is the number 1 hotshot offensive coordinator from this coaching cycle, Liam Cohen was a very close second. In my mind, he goes to Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence has BTJ. Trevor Lawrence gets Travis Hunter added to the mix here. They make some additions on the offensive line. But Scott, where do you think Trevor Lawrence is at this point in his career? Because I would argue that he's too good to be considered like a this year's Sam Darnold, but I know that other people, and maybe you, I'm not sure, like where would you feel he's not that good, and like it does need that sort of career rebirth?
Well, I'll say this: if they had just run it all back, right, and Brian Thomas is terrific, but if they had kept the coaching staff, not drafted Hunter, I mean, Trevor Lawrence might as well not be on my board, unless you could tell me a story, because he's occasionally had splashes of rushing production, unless he was going to kind of cheat code his way into relevance that way. I'm like, well, I haven't seen any proof that this guy is capable of being a consistent above average quarterback, but they draft such an important prospect in Hunter. Thomas just won all levels of the field with horrible quarterback play, with a team that was like a sinking ship. around him. And yet every week he was, and not only was he open and dynamic on the plays that he made, there were so many plays, from charting, there's so many plays where he beat his guy and never saw the ball, or he beat his guy and the throw was off target. I mean, the season he could have had if they actually had plus quarterback play. So Liam Cohen is one of the right answers. He did too many things right last year. And he understands also really good at designing splash plays in the passing game from his running backs. We saw what he did last year with Bucky Irving. Rashad White was a useful pass catcher as well. So if they can identify, they obviously drafted Tootin, who they're hoping can do some of that. Bigsby, they have not thrown the ball to, but you would think that role would expand. Does Travis Etienne break camp with the team? He was obviously a dynamic pass catcher with Lawrence in college. We haven't really seen that consistently in the NFL. Cohen's going to find a way to get those. Those are such easy yards in those plays. Yeah, that's such a take advantage of it. You think of some of the best quarterbacks in league history. Brady loved to throw to his running backs, right? Sean Payton is one of the best offensive coordinators. He loves to throw to his running backs. It's a staple of the Cohen offense. So if Lawrence has a breakout season, of course, it's going to be about Thomas. Of course, it's going to be about Hunter. Maybe Brent Strange has a breakout season. They've been talking about his blocking plus abilities, which is a little bit of a gift and a curse for fantasy. But, maybe he's another Penn State tight end who becomes interesting to us. But I think also if Lawrence breaks through, we're going to say, oh, yeah, they found a really reliable staple in this offense, and it's throwing to the running backs. It helps you matriculate the ball down the field and keep those drives going and being more difficult to defend. I talked in an earlier show with you. I think the Jaguars are fascinating. Hunter makes them fascinating. Thomas makes them fascinating. Cohen and Lawrence makes them fascinating. I'd love to be at their practices. I'd love to be in their huddles and their locker rooms and see what's going on, see what makes Cohen tick. And I think there's a good chance that basically Lawrence is going to maybe have like the Baker Mayfield bounce back, right? Where he wasn't left for dead the way Baker Mayfield was, but maybe Lawrence is a Pro Bowler this year, and it's going to be because he has the fingerprints of Cohen all over him.
Yeah, that's a good point that he could be like sort of a Baker Mayfield. Obviously, he's not changed teams, but I think people, myself included, I clearly did this in my Baker Mayfield analysis when he went to Tampa Bay, just kind of erased the fact that he was like a perfectly solid quarterback, maybe even above average at times with the Cleveland Browns. And I think Trevor Lawrence has been a disappointment as the number one overall pick and maybe is not worth has yet to prove himself to be worth the current contract that he is on. But I see, to me, Scott, I think he's like a perfectly acceptable, at least average starting quarterback that you can win with. I think the question is, can he become a guy that you win because of? But with this surrounding talent, he should, even if he's a guy that you win with, could potentially put up like top 10 numbers. I actually think of all the guys we've talked about so far, Fields kind of aside because he is the rushing threat, the guy that I could see putting up like a Sam Darnold season, where he's QB8 this year, is probably Trevor Lawrence, just because I am a Cohen believer, and I do think these two receivers are so dynamic together in Hunter and Thomas. And by the way, like De'Ami Brown's not the worst like sacrificial X receiver in the world, stretching things out and allowing these two other guys to move around the formation, and occasionally can catch up a deep pass here and there.
Yeah, I like Brown certainly a lot more for NFL purposes than I do for fantasy, but you want him as part of this offense. And go back to where's the proof of concept? Lawrence was quarterback 7 in 2022. It seems like a lot of guys on the show were really good in that season. And he was quarterback 12 the year after that. And that's before Brian Thomas even hits town. So we've seen, and I know a lot of it was the sprinkling of the running game, sometimes of Lawrence's running skills. And sometimes it was having to be more heavy on the pass side of things. But Trevor Lawrence is, right now, I'll tell you what, if you draft Trevor Lawrence, I feel very confident he'll beat his ADP. Will he smash it? That remains to be seen. That depends on how much you think Hunter can do his first year and how much you believe in Cohen, how much he was responsible for what Tampa Bay did the last 2 years. Because again, success has many parents. And a lot of that is about Mayfield. A lot of that's about Evans. A lot of it is about Godwin. A lot of it is about the good support players. Irving was a breakout player last year. They have decent tight end play there. They've always had decent support receivers. Tampa Bay has good talent. So it's how do you divvy up the credit for that? But Mayfield. Lawrence is somebody. Here's the thing. I'm not even sure how actually good he is, but how can you not be good when you're throwing to Thomas, when you're throwing to Hunter, when Cohen's calling the plays, and they're going to find a pass catcher out of the backfield? I'm not sure who it's going to be. Maybe it's going to be Tootin. but or maybe they coach Bigsby up in that way. We talked about ETN, his role of the team a little bit up in the air, but maybe he ends up having a renaissance season. Somebody there's going to be a right answer. And we'll go back to our running back programs where we did talk about Jacksonville's running game extensively. But at the end of the day, I said Kevin O'Connell was fall into a burning building. I don't know if I'd follow Liam Cohen into a burning building, but at least if there's smoke coming out, I would still follow Cohen. I mean, I believe in this guy. I like what he's done the last couple of years, and I think the Jaguars are going to be a fun team again.
I'm open to following him by the end of the season. Just I would follow him. Let me say this: I would follow him as an offensive coordinator after what we saw last year, but obviously head coach is just a different job. You're right about Lawrence that if he starts all year and as long as he's healthy, he is going to start all year. They're not going to start like a backup quarterback here or something like that. Like he is going to outproduce his ADP, and like fantasy ADP kind of implies that to you. He's QB 19 right now in consensus ADP right now over at Fantasy Pros on Trevor Lawrence. Meanwhile, he's got a receiver who goes at wide receiver 8, 14th overall in Brian Thomas Jr., and he's got a receiver in Travis Hunter who's going as wide receiver 31, 70th overall. Like if those guys are going to hit that, Lawrence probably outproduces that. But to your point, Scott, like he's already done that before. And that's why I don't know that he fits in this exercise. Like he's already had, like Sam Darnold was never dreaming of being like the QB7 or QB12, as you said, when he was with the damn New York Jets. He was like the worst and least efficient starting quarterback in the league. Same with like Geno was never up there. It's just like that's why he's kind of a cheat in this exercise. But let me just, before we move on from this group, who do you have more faith in reviving a really bad offensive ecosystem, Ben Johnson in Chicago or Liam Cohen in Jacksonville this season?
Even though I'm in love with Thomas, and Hunter's going to be a great pro, I don't know how much will happen right away because I think Hunter needs to be the alpha initially, and Hunter will play some on defense. But the overall pieces in Chicago are so much deeper, right? Yeah. I mean, they have 5 really good, probably pass catchers, and they've upgraded the offensive line. I mean, every team, what team says, oh, you know what, we kind of let the offensive line slip? I guess the Lions, because they had a retirement, you can point to them. But every team says, we've upgraded the offensive line, right? It's like 28 teams are claiming that right now, and we know that won't prove to be true. But Ben Johnson has a longer track record, and he's just got more to work with. So I have to feel better about the situation in Chicago. I wish they were an indoor team, maybe, because the weather could be a factor in the second half of the year. And Caleb Williams, which is set up to fail last year with Waldron, we talked about, even though he did have that moment in Seattle, he's not a coordinator that we trust a lot. What Levitan and Silva always call him Shane Fraudron, I think is what they call Shane Waldron.
Yes.
So not meant as a compliment, of course, but they gave, I make the joke that Caleb Williams get everything he wanted for Christmas, right? Because what does every quarterback want? Hey, better line would be nice. How about another receiver? How about an impact tight end? Yeah, check. We got all those guys. And everybody on the team who was good last year came back. DJ Moore's back. Adunze's back. I don't know what they're going to do in the running back room, but maybe that means they'll throw the ball a little bit more. The Bears are a fascinating team to watch because, Again, you talk about, sometimes these coordinators, when they become head coaches, I mentioned Josh McDaniels earlier, a great coordinator, horrible head coach. A lot of that had to do with his people skills. But Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen are now responsible for the entire roster and responsible for all the media demands. And they're the face of the franchise now. And for every Andy Reid or Sean McVay who can handle that, there are a lot of guys who can't. Sean Payton, obviously another hit there. We'll see what Kellen Moore does with the Saints, who's a well thought of designer and all that. But some guys are meant to be coordinators. So we're going to learn a lot about who Cohen and Johnson really are this season.
I think I'm with you that I think I would go with Ben Johnson and the Bears there over Jacksonville. But it's not like by leaps and bounds, but I think that's the one that I prefer. Last bucket of quarterbacks to talk through here, and we can rapid fire these because these are the messy quarterback rooms that maybe we dare to give a little bit of hope to here. So I'm going to throw these 3 out. We've got the Giants with Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston. Jameis is not touching this football field if those 2 guys are healthy, sorry to say. Browns with Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett, and Shedeur Sanders. And then there's the Saints with Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler. Jake Haener, not a part of the equation. Please leave him off the graphics going forward. So, Scott, all 3 of these might not work out. In fact, they probably won't. But if one was going to work out this year, which one do you have like the most little bit of optimism about? New York, Cleveland, or New Orleans?
I guess it's New York, just because Dable is going to he goes to bed scheming up neighbors, and he wakes up scheming up neighbor. What was 171 targets or something like that last year? Just an obscene number. And actually, the support guys aren't bad either. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, they're not bad players. They have a couple of running backs who I'm interested in. So it has to be the Giants by default. Although I look at all these teams and I see multiple quarterbacks starting for all these teams. Even if Winston 100%. Doesn't get on the field, you get to figure Jackson Dart's going to play a quarter of the season, a third of the season, something like that. Plus, Russell Wilson is somebody who everybody likes a lot more from further away, and then they don't seem to like him as much when he gets into the locker room. Denver couldn't wait to get rid of him. Pittsburgh couldn't wait to get rid of him. The Giants seem to accept that he's just a one-year placeholder or maybe a half-year placeholder until their first-round quarterback gets to play. The thing is, Dable needs to keep his job, right? As much as it's great, let's get ready for the future, and Jackson Dart's our future. Let's not rush him. Brian Dable needs to be in the employ of the New York Giants to take advantage of that. So you'd think Dart would probably play a third of the year. The Browns, man, I joke about wanting to play 13-10 games and how maybe the Jets would sign up for a full season of that. The Browns would sign up for a full season of 6-3 if they can get it. They're going to run the ball, defense, cold weather, bad weather. Every quarterback has something wrong with them, right? I mean, Flacco's too old. Nobody understood why they took Gabriel where they did, and then they draft Sanders, probably with different decision makers making that call after the Gabriel pick. Pickett is a player who's bounced around. Maybe I don't know, is Kenny Pickett. Can you tell yourself a story that Kenny Pickett figures out, his draft capital and applies it to a comeback season? They only have one wide receiver I feel that great about in Judy, and even Judy, he doesn't run everything in the route tree that well. Sometimes I think he really plays to avoid contact. I don't like him as a touchdown guy. Cleveland is they're going to be that first window Sunday where it's like, the Browns game has already ended. Every other game is in the third quarter. It's going to be something like that. Their games are going to end 20 minutes early if they go according to script.
Yeah, and then New Orleans is actually the one that I think we could get like a 17-game starter from. Because I'm with you that the Giants, Russell Wilson starts week 1, but I think the hook could come pretty quickly, especially because their schedule is so difficult, and I think that they need Jackson Dart to kind of be part of a job saver there. I could see all 4 of these dudes starting for Cleveland this year, although I'm kind of skeptical that all 4 of them are going to be in the week 1 roster. And with New Orleans, though, I think they want Tyler Shuck to win the job in camp and be the 17-game starter and kind of the guy going forward. I think they want him to be basically what Derek Carr was for the Raiders back in the day, like a above average quarterback starter who comes from the second round. And I will say this, if Chris Olave, knock on freaking wood, is healthy, Rashid Shaheed is healthy, the offensive line is definitely, again, if they are healthy, an upgraded unit. I could see this offense having a little something. I can't wait to see how Chris Olave is deployed by Kellen Moore. So I'm not that big of a Tyler Shuck guy or anything, but I do think he is quietly set up to succeed in New Orleans, maybe more so than these guys in Cleveland and New York.
Make me feel better about drafting Chris Olave. He's had so many concussions. My heart's broken, and I don't blame any of this. I just want the guy to be healthy. I just want the guy to have a good life, and if he has a great NFL career, that's lovely too. I know he could be a top 5, top 10 receiver, but everything's gone wrong for him. Tell me why I should or shouldn't draft Chris Olave this year.
Well, okay. Number one, about the concussions. I don't know, bro. I got another for you on that, right? I actually think Brandon Cooks is, ironically, for some reason on this roster, he was a guy who people kind of spoke of in the same way. My God, is the concussions, is it too much? When he was with the Rams, and he's gone on to play with the Texans, and then of course he was with the Cowboys, and now he's on his third team since people were kind of skeptical if he needed to hang it up because of concussion. So that's just a total unknown. I have no idea. For a minute too. Yeah, right. I mean, he's been a lot of places. Somehow now, again, he's back with the team that drafted him. But the 2 selling points with Olave, one is he's wide receiver 35. I'm not asking you to pay the iron price to take Chris Olave. 2, he is such a good player, and I do think could be deployed in many more creative ways than we've seen so far. I've talked about this before, but in the Pete Carmichael offense in his first 2 years, had no layups, no slants, no in breakers. And then last year with the Kubiak offense, he was primarily their X receiver running routes over the middle of the field, which I think he actually played pretty well in. But think about how Kellen Moore activated like Devontae Smith last year. And I think Devontae Smith has some similar skills to Chris Olave, where there are these great route runners who can take advantage of the full tree. And I think this offense is going to have Olave more in the slot, like more off the line of scrimmage. Maybe Cooks is running sort of those clear out routes, or Shaheed is running more of the clear out routes. And I think Shuck might just be like, hey, this is my first guy. I'm locked in on my first read. He wants to get the ball out quickly. And if Olave is deployed in those ways where he's running out routes from the slot, which we've not really seen before from him, again, it's just the role change could be good. So a lot of what I just said there is ifs and hopes and maybes and this, that, and the other. But again, at wide receiver 35, I'm not asking you to like really believe as you click this guy.
So I just want to ask a fun question. I know we've talked about this before on different shows, but that Ohio State receiver legacy, right? And let's just not include Jeremiah Smith, who was unbelievable last year as a freshman and is going to be an impact player, is going to be a top 5 pick when he comes out. Just speaking on what you saw at Ohio State, which receiver would you have thought of? We're talking Olave, we're talking Harrison, we're talking Garrett Wilson, we're talking JSN. Which of those guys, just based on his college tape, would you have been most sold on being a superstar in the NFL?
Harrison would have been the guy. And so I'm still like perfectly fine believing that after 1 year. But it's also worth noting that with Harrison, like the reason he was such a good receiver prospect is that he was like a can't miss prospect. And what I mean by that is that I think there was no way he was going to like come in the league and outright bust, because he had such a good floor. He was such a good technician. He was so professional in that way, which kind of makes just the wording of your question, like, is he like come in and be a superstar? I do think he can still be a superstar player, no question about it. But just like the floor on him was so high, that was why I ranked him as the best prospect in that class. And ultimately, why he's like my top ranked receiver of the last 5 years, just ahead of Jamar Chase. So that he would be the answer there. And then I think if I was to stack the rest of the guys, like I believe I had it, Olave, Wilson, Smith, and Jigba. I do think, though, now based on what we've seen so far, like I would have Wilson ahead of Olave. And then I still think Njigba is the fourth guy for me there.
I'm just dying someday for Garrett Wilson to have the right setup. I think he's ready to explode. He just hasn't had the right quarterback yet. And it speaks to how loaded that room has been that I didn't get Egbuka into that question. And perhaps my favorite, even though I'm a Michigan guy, I love talking Ohio State receivers. Perhaps my favorite part of this is never forget, Jameson Williams had to leave Ohio State and go to Alabama so he'd get on the field because he wasn't going to play for the Buckeyes, which just blows my mind. Because Jameson Williams, a mercurial player at times, he can lose his mind every once in a while. He's been suspended. He's taken dumb penalties. But man, does he petrify a defense on a snap-to-snap basis.
All right, well, you saying Garrett Wilson getting a good quarterback does perfectly transition to our we got to vote on this, Scott.
We do. Voting.
We do have to vote on this. We do have to crown this year's Sam Darnold. I do think Justin Fields should be one of our 3 finalists. I don't even know if we need 3, but like who should be our finalists of all the guys that we discussed so far? I do think Fields has to be in the mix. Who do you think our other 3 finalists should be?
Fields has to be there. I want to pick Jones because I think he fits the ethos of this show better than anybody else. So Fields and Jones, and then we have to add maybe one of the Williams-Lawrence guys, I guess.
Yeah, I guess if that's the category, then I think we gotta say like, we don't have to have 3 finalists. Let's just do Justin Fields versus Daniel Jones. Like, let's just do that. We don't have to have 3 finalists if we don't want to. This is this is our show, Scott. We can do whatever we want. Yeah. Fields, Daniel Jones. Who do you think is more likely to be this year's Sam Darnold?
Well, it's Fields, but Jones is going to be drafted so much later that, Fields, if you're looking to, let's use it in baseball terms, you're looking to get on base, your guy is Fields. If you're just swinging for the fences, you don't care if you strike out, but you're trying to be a hero and hit a home run, then your guy is Daniel Jones.
Love the way you said that. I also agree. I think it is Justin Fields. And the reason that I think it's Fields over Jones, and I think it actually is really what you said right there, that the reason Sam Darnold became Sam Darnold last year, in addition to the fact he had a good a good offensive coordinator, a good offensive mind, and the great pass catchers, is he had a lot of tools, man. Like Mayfield also has a lot of tools. Geno Smith, a lot of tools. And I'm skeptical of that with Daniel Jones. I think Jones can clear the Minshew minimum, as we talked about earlier, and like operate this Colts offense well. But Fields still has he has a strong arm. He has the physical ability. So ultimately, I think that it really comes back to Tanner Engstrand. Like, what pass game design are we going to get here? Like, how is Garrett Wilson going to be moved around the formation? Those are the big outstanding questions I have here. In addition to, can Justin Fields be good? But I agree with you. I think our winner here, who is our most likely candidate to be this year, Sam Darnold? I do think it has to be Justin Fields. And Scott, I'm hoping for the first time ever, I'm on the right side of history this time.
So we keep mentioning Minshew. Daniel Jones should go full Minshew. Grow the hair out, grow a mustache, just leave New York behind and just totally reinvent yourself, not just on the field, but off the field. Maybe become a page 6 guy, start dating somebody who's famous. If this thing doesn't work out with Kelsey and Taylor Swift, maybe Daniel Jones can insert his hat into that ring. But I don't know. Just, you know what? Maybe that's never going to happen. But do the hair, do the mustache. Go full Minshew. Let's see. Reinvent yourself. A new team, new city. Nobody knows you. It's like, it doesn't matter who you were in high school. When you go to college, you can reinvent yourself, right? We're the age of the internet. Everybody reinvents themselves, right? Albums go in different directions. Directors go in different directions. You can be somebody different. Be somebody different, Daniel Jones.
I will tell you off air once we get off the podcast why I think that Daniel Jones can perfectly fit into that ethos that you just laid out there. But again, we'll save that for an off air discussion. As for us, Scott, that is going to do it. We put a wrap here on Flip the Script. If you haven't caught up with the rest of the series, everybody, make sure to go back and check them out. They all pretty much hold up. They're evergreen, things of that nature. So if you're watching on YouTube, go check it out. You're listening to the podcast. Give us a subscription and maybe leave us a nice review if you like Flip the Script. Well, actually, only leave us a nice review. If you don't like Flip the Script, just keep it moving. Pretend this never happened. Scott, happy 4th of July to you. Appreciate you being here. What are you working on? What can the people check out from you?
Yeah, we're in the middle of the fantasy baseball season, so all sorts of fantasy baseball content there. And I am doing also fantasy football content in addition to being the fantasy nugget guy for the Frank Schwab NFL Power Ranking Series, which he runs down all the way up to the Hall of Fame game. Schwab, just a great NFL writer. So, we were so lucky, man. You get to talk to Nate Tice all the time, Charles McDonald all the time. Schwab's one of my main guys. He's one of our senior NFL writers, so and a great fantasy player as well. So, make sure you're consuming our NFL content in addition to our fantasy directed content. It'll make you a better fantasy player. But happy to be riding shotgun with Frank. Happy to be doing some fantasy baseball as well. And man, with July here, we're just about into the teeth of the fantasy draft season. A lot of people will draft into July. Obviously, August is a hotbed for fantasy drafting. So I'm just excited to be talking about it with you.
I am very excited to be talking about it with you as well, my friend. And that leads us to, we're starting next week. We are back in your feeds every Tuesday and Thursday, as I mentioned. And happy to say on our next show, our newest edition here at Yahoo Fantasy, Justin Boone is going to make his highly anticipated Yahoo Fantasy podcast debut. So you do not want to miss that. We will see you next week for that episode. Until then, we are out.